Let me ask you this, Sage. There's a lot of other tough decisions. Mike Zimmer talked on Monday about how he's looking at some of these older players and saying, is it time to move on from this guy, this guy, this guy? Where do you think the toughest decision is on this roster outside of Kirk Cousins?
By the way, do you think this is going to be a super interesting offseason for the Vikings? I think it is.
I definitely
think
do.
there's going to be
Yes.
a lot of
100%.
conversation pieces.
Yes.
Quarterback is always one of them. But right now it's coaching staff, and then as now we're leading into free agency's coming up. There's salary cap. They want to sign guys who doesn't have anything left, and they have a high salary, or who might be a little bit overpaid, but there's not somebody out there to replace them, and we don't think we're going to draft anybody at that position. So we're going to sort of overpay for a player. I mean, also they're the only ones who know the injuries. As far as the trainers and the GM and all that stuff. So we don't know. Like, I don't know how Linval Joseph's back is, but I do know this: you play 10 years or whatever at D line in this league. I've seen a lot of guys very quickly they get a bad back or something, and boom, it's over.
Yeah,
because those guys are taking on double teams from the guard and the center, and they have to hold their ground. And to do that, they're sticking their feet in the ground, they're driving the feet, and all of that pressure from that collision and then the force after it goes right to your lower back or right into your back. And I see D tackles like Linval go out really fast.
Yes.
And I hope it doesn't happen. I hope that's not the case. But, only the Vikings maybe know some of those little details that we don't know anything about. So I think there's going to be a lot of moving pieces this offseason. They're going to keep some guys, and I think there might be a surprise trade or surprise release or two. And I guess we'll have to sort of see how it all, sort of shakes out and breaks down. And there might be a situation where they get rid of someone they really like, but they can get some sort of compensation, whether it's a draft pick or another free agent or another player on another team to straight up trade a position they feel like they need more, and that player has some value. So it should be an interesting offseason for this Vikings team.
Just a couple of years ago on Linval, he was the premier nose tackle in the NFL, and among all defensive tackles was rated in the top 5 by Pro Football Focus. This year, he's 30th. And with the amount that they're paying him, you can't be 30th. You can't be in the same ballpark as Leonard Williams, who's not any good, or in the same ballpark as Danny Shelton, or the guy that they didn't want to draft a few years ago, Maurice Hurst, because of his heart issue, but he's turned out to be a pretty decent player. But if you're going to be paid that much, you can't be in that ballpark. And you're right about how those guys fade quick.
That's a very important position. Yeah, we had a guy seemed like almost similar to Linval named Tim Bowens when I was in Miami.
I remember Tim Bowens.
And Tim Bowens was just a beast of a D lineman. He probably weighed 375 or something. He was 6'7". And that's why Zach Thomas for years made all of these tackles, because he would clog up the center and the guard. They'd double team him so long, and Zach would be running. And he was probably holding back then too, but you couldn't leave just a 295-pound center on him. He was just so big, and that was just so valuable to that defense. And obviously, during the Childress area, the Williamses, they were so dominant on the inside, allowed those running backs to run and make a lot of tackles. And so it's a very, very important position. And obviously, Linval did not have a great year, but we'll see if he's back. And I'm sure a fairly high salary. He's not in a rookie contract by any means. And so
$12.4 million cap hit for next year. That can't happen. That just absolutely will not happen. He's not playing next year on a $12.4 million cap hit. The older players are the toughest. I mean, Xavier Rhodes, I think, should be gone. He's supposed to be paid $14 million. They can get out of that for $2 million. And Everson Griffin's the toughest one because he can void his contract because he reached certain levels that he needed to with playing time and sacks and so forth. And I think he'll do that. But next year he's on the cap for 14.4, but the Vikings can move on basically for free. So they have some really, really tough calls there. I wonder what you think.
Those guys have been, mainstays in this D-line
the entire time that Zimmer's been here.
The Zimmer time. I mean, so we're definitely going to see a change of the guard a little bit. And the question is, who do they replace?
Change of the nose guard.
Yeah.
Am I right?
In free agency, and then this draft.
Right on, doesn't care.
Last year's draft was all, I don't. Last year's draft was all offense, or a lot of offense, and this year's draft, maybe it's more defensive heavy.
I think it could be.
For some of those, key positions.
All right. We were talking about this a little bit yesterday, and I wonder what you think about it. What could be the thing that really takes us by surprise with this offseason? And if you call it, I guess then it won't take us by surprise anymore, but I think I have something. And we assume that after week 4, Stefon Diggs just wrote his own game plan for the next few weeks and he caught a bunch of passes and he was happy. And he goes into this offseason really thrilled about life and everything else with the Vikings. But I think that's a little much to assume that everything was just okay in Stefon Diggs' mind about being on a team that threw the ball just about less than any other team in the entire NFL this year. I think in Stefon Diggs' mind, and he's not wrong about this, that he believes he should be a 100-catch guy year in and year out and one of the best receivers in the NFL. He should have name recognition. He should have a Madden cover. He should have all those things because that's what he puts on tape. And that's what his efficiency numbers show from last year for sure, that there are very few receivers ever who have caught 70% of their passes at 18 yards a catch. I wouldn't be shocked if he said, look, if Mike Zimmer is going to continue to want to run first offense, I'm not sure I want to be a part of that.
Well, here's what's interesting, though, is it about catches or is it about, yards and wins? And to me, it's not about catches. It's about yards and wins. And he had 102 catches last year, for just over 1,000 yards. And this year he had 1,130 on only 63 catches. So, but his yards, he's went from 10 to 18. He is a premier wide receiver. I think he's being treated as a premier wide receiver. The thing is, he also has, when Thielen was healthy this year, a premier guy on the other side. So, I mean, that's just sort of the way it goes. And that's one of the reasons that his yards per catch gets really high, because teams are also focused on him. They're focused on the tight ends. There's a lot of weapons to this football team. He also gets, a lot of one-on-one coverage on the outside because of that running game, with Dalvin Cook. So he's an important piece of this offense, but, I think he had, 1,100 yards this year. Without a quarterback that, couldn't really make things, 1,100 yards that were usually, the reason they happened is because they were designed and they were executed. It wasn't like there were some, a couple hundred yards of a quarterback making plays and then heaving the ball 55 yards down the field like we see some of these other quarterbacks. We just didn't, see that for Stefon. And I mean, if he wants to be unhappy about it, that's sort of the way it goes. But he's an interesting player on this football team. He's very, very talented, but you see some of the challenges that he sometimes can bring to the team when you're in a tight ball game, and he's upset. I think they're winning that ball game in the playoffs, and he was upset he wasn't had enough catches, and it's a team sport, and sometimes you get the ball and sometimes you don't.
Yeah, and everything you said there is 100% correct, but I don't know if that's what's in Stefon Diggs' mind. Right. You know what I mean? Like, I think there can be a difference between the objective reality, which is he was over 1,000 yards and was a big play wide receiver and had a tremendously great season and got the ball a lot in situations for him to make big plays and dance backward into the end zone and everything else. But it seems to have been his disposition early in the season that the offense was based around a running game and they threw the third fewest passes in the entire NFL. So I could see him looking at that and saying, I want to be on more of a pass first offense. I want to raise my level from not 1,000-yard receiver, but a 1,500-yard receiver. I want to be considered up there with Julio Jones and DeAndre Hopkins. I'm thinking about like Kyrie Irving left LeBron James because he wanted his own team. Like, athletes do not think just always squarely logically, So if there's one thing that could take us by surprise, I think it's that. Did you have something that popped in your mind?
I was going to say, are you looking into like a possible trade scenario to like would surprise everybody?
Yeah,
but
his
that's
what I was thinking.
Is extremely high, and maybe there's not everything is great, behind the scenes. And
people don't just skip practice for 2 days in a row. It just says, like, I've never seen it before since covering the team that someone just like doesn't show up for work for a few days.
The Giants got rid of Odell Beckham Jr.
Right.
For I think a first rounder and a third rounder or something like that. So, they decided to move on from a player maybe with that similar sort of mentality, I guess, of wearing his feelings on his sleeve or whatever that phrase is, for emotions on his sleeve. But maybe he's a guy that the Vikings get a first round draft pick for Stefon Diggs. I mean, and that can help you get the quarterback you need. I mean, that might be a situation that the Vikings would have to think about, but only they know. And only Stefon knows how they feel about come back to this football team next year.
So I just want to make a quick correction. I had clicked forward to 2021 and not 2020 on those Linval Joseph and Xavier Rhodes dead cap hits. And I appreciate our listener, David, for pointing this out to me. So Linval, they can move on for $2.4 million of dead cap. and they could move on from Xavier Rhodes for 4.8. And both of those guys are going to make $12.9 million this year. It doesn't really change the conversation. It's the same.
They'd be saving about $18 million
yes.
For the cap that could be used for, who knows what. So you got to think that they're going to make a couple of those moves, at least two, if not three of those guys on defense who've been there for a while. Good chance they might be somewhere else next year.
Yep, for sure. Now, Monday, you and I will have a chance, Sage, to break down who is going to be in the Super Bowl. And we'll see if we have maybe an offensive coordinator by then, or if not, we can discuss what the Vikings should be looking for some of these coaching positions that are wide open and what that means toward their future. So great stuff as always, Sage. Appreciate you, man.
Looking forward to next week, and we'll see how this championship goes. The Packers and the 49ers, two classic football teams who have won their fair share of Super Bowls.
Another Rosen Bowl.
And two coaches that are like, basically best friends. So this should be a fun game.